Speaking of Venezuela, we're learning today President Nicolas Maduro is setting up a plan to ration power across the country. Right now, millions of Venezuelans continue struggling to come up with some basic needs because of yet another nationwide blackout. It's the second blackout to hit the country in weeks and comes as the United States and Russia clash over whether the country's elected president should be overthrown. Joining us now with the latest is RT's Rachel Blevins. Rachel?
As tensions continue to rise in Venezuela, opposition leader Juan Guaido is now admitting that, although he has said he has the support of 90% of the people in the country, his success at becoming the next president relies on support from the military. Rival demonstrations were held over the weekend in Venezuela, and citizens took to the street to show their support for both Guaido and for elected President Nicolas Maduro. But the crowd served as a reminder that although Guaido has managed to garner the support from the United States and a number of its allies, he still does not have the support of the country's military. Russia, China, and Turkey have also maintained their support for Maduro, and the foreign minister of Venezuela traveled to Ankara today to meet with Turkish officials. Turkey's foreign minister confirmed that his country plans to increase cooperation with Venezuela in all fields despite pressure from the U.S. And while there have been conflicting reports over whether the Maduro government would allow shipments of humanitarian aid inside the country, more than 65 tons of medicine and supplies were delivered by China to Caracas on Friday. The Chinese ambassador called Venezuela an essential strategic partner and friend and said that this shipment will be the first of many. However, the citizens of Venezuela have continued to struggle as massive blackouts spread across the country in recent days. Maduro announced a 30-day plan to ration electricity in response to the massive outages, which he again blamed on what he called a terrorist attack from U.S.-backed opponents. But the frustration surrounding the situation came to a head as crowds of protesters in some districts took to the streets, blocking traffic and clashing with police. While citizens struggled to gain access to the most basic resources in Venezuela, Guaido's wife received the royal treatment in the U.S., and in addition to a meeting with President Trump in Washington, D.C., Fabiana Rosales traveled to Miami, where she was presented with the key to the city and referred to as the First Lady of Venezuela. Tensions have also continued to rise between the United States and Russia amid reports that the Russian military personnel were present in Caracas. And despite threats from the U.S., Russia has maintained that it will keep military experts in Caracas for as long as the government needs them. So as U.S. officials claim that Russia's involvement in Venezuela is a provocative threat, it has sparked fears that clashes in Venezuela could pick up where conflict in Syria left off. In Washington, Rachel Blevins, RT.
Joining me now to discuss the latest out of Venezuela is investigative journalist Ben Swann, live in our studio. Ben, thank you so much for joining me today. Now, I want to start with, why is it a struggle for the Venezuelan people to get the aid that they need?
Well, I think there's a whole series of struggles here, and one of the biggest issues is infrastructure. When the infrastructure in a country like Venezuela, which has already had problems in the past, is now having almost record and historic problems, lights out, water shortages, food shortages, which they've had for some time. The question becomes, why are these shortages taking place? Is there a reason other than aging infrastructure? Is there a reason other than dilapidation and incompetence, which is what the U.S. government and U.S. media would tell you is the sole and primary reason, and that's the only reason? So I think we have to dig into that. Why is this all happening right now at the same moment that the U.S. is working actively to create regime change there?
And in saying that, Maduro has been blaming a plan in southeastern Venezuela, which is supplied by the U.S., saying that this is causing the blackouts. I want to talk about how these blackouts and the shortages, they're crippling those in Venezuela and commerce.
Well, they are. Imagine having, out of your 23 states in your country, 14 to 16 of them with no power whatsoever. I mean, that's the situation there. Businesses can't operate without power. The online infrastructure is completely collapsed in that country in so many places. And then you have the average day-to-day person just trying to get food and water in that country. So forget about going to work and making a living. You're just trying to survive at this point. And you have to look at what is happening combined with the effort right now by the U.S. to say we have have to impose regime change. It has not worked so far to build up Juan Guaido as the hero of the people who's going to ride in on a white horse and save everyone. That is not catching on with the people of Venezuela. And when that doesn't catch on, what is the next step? Now, I'm not blaming the U.S. for all these problems, but certainly I think you have to look deeper into why, again, are all these things happening with an accelerated rate. Maduro's claims, you know, that a sniper, I think he claimed, fired a bullet that set this fire that started burning the southeastern part of the country and destroyed one of these power plants. What's really causing it? I don't think we actually have the answer to that, but I also think we have to look with a critical eye and say, certainly it is serving the U.S. interests and the Guaido interests to see problems in that country right now that would actually cause people to uprise and say, we've had enough. We don't care who leads us, just let this come to an end.
And maybe later on we'll find out exactly what's causing these issues. Now, let's talk about President Nicolas Maduro. He has a 30-day electricity ration plan. What's that? Yeah, so his plan is essentially he wants to cut down on the number of people using the power services of the country, right? And there actually is a good reason for that, because once the power grid collapses, as it has in the country, and it gets restored, it's not restored at 100%. It's now a weakened power grid. And so when it goes out again and goes out again and goes out again, as we've been seeing happen, now the power grid becomes increasingly weakened. And so what Maduro is trying to do is institute these rations on power, essentially to say let's all control the amount that's being used to not continue to weaken the power grid. It's probably not a bad plan, but if you're living in that country, is this the news you want to hear, that now the new normal is to not have power on a regular basis? Definitely probably is not something you want to hear. Now, Juan Guaido, the self-proclaimed president of Venezuela, he's saying that what we're witnessing in the country is as a result of neglect and mismanagement on the part of Maduro's government. What do you say to that? Well, is it mismanagement and incompetence in terms of getting it back up? Possibly. I don't know. But I think the claim that these are, old aging infrastructures, I don't think you can argue with that. They likely are old and aging infrastructures that are in place. But also keep this in mind, and there's a little bit of a side note here. I mean, look at the infrastructure in Puerto Rico, the U.S. territory of Puerto Rico, that is still struggling in some places to get the power back on after a hurricane. So the U.S. and Juan Guaido would be quick to point at Venezuela and say, look at this aging infrastructure. This is a sign of incompetence and corruption. Well, what does that say for the U.S. territory of Puerto Rico, that we still can't turn the electricity back on in so many areas there at the same time? Good point. We have about 20 seconds left. Really quickly, do you foresee Maduro stepping down anytime soon? I can answer that very quickly. Maduro is not stepping down. The question is, will there be enough of an appetite among the people, more specifically among the military, to force him out? If lifestyle and infrastructure continues to collapse, we may actually see that appetite. All right, we're going to leave it right there. Thank you so much, Ben Swann. Ashley, thanks.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.